During the Yugoslav wars, one of the most twisted paramilitary groups would earn a grim reputation: Arkans Tigers. This group was founded by Serbian football hooligans and led by a gangster. They would carry out ethnic cleansing, war crimes, and serious SA. In today's video, we will look at the disturbing history of one of the most notorious paramilitary groups. It's perhaps helpful to start with an introduction to the man known as Arkan, the criminal leader of the group, Željko Arkan Raznatović. He was born in 1952 in Slovenia, then the Republic of Yugoslavia. His father was a decorated and senior Yugoslav Air Force officer. The young Arkan's father was abusive and ran his household in a militaristic fashion. Arkan, by all accounts, was a problem child, clashing constantly with his father and his teachers. When he was just 14, Arkan was arrested for snatching a woman's purse, spending a year in a youth detention facility for this crime. In a desperate attempt to instill a sense of discipline, his father attempted to have Arkan join the Navy, but the 15-year-old Arkan fled to France and he just continued his life of crime. By 1969, he had been arrested again and deported back home. In prison, Arkan only expanded his criminal enterprise. He built a gang and gained connections with leading criminals of Yugoslavia, and built a relationship with Yugoslavian secret police. During the 1970s and 80s, Arkan gained much infamy as a prolific bank robber, and for his ability to escape prison under suspicious circumstances. His crime spree would take him all over Europe, aided by the secret police to evade capture and imprisonment for a long time. In one striking example, Arkan had shot 2 police officers in Belgrade who were seeking to arrest him, though he was released from prison only 2 days later. Far from being a petty criminal, Arkan's many activities landed him on one of Interpol's 10 most wanted criminals. By 1986, Arkan had returned home. It's at this point that he opened a cake and ice cream shop right opposite the stadium of Serbia's most successful football team, Red Star Belgrade. From here, he soon became the leader of the football club's hooligans, reportedly instructed to do so by his secret police handlers. Arkan was head of the Red Star Hooligans during the infamous Dynamo Red Star riot in May of 1990, which saw thousands of hooligans clash with Croatian and Serbian nationalism playing a major role. During this time, the collapse of Yugoslavia in the early 1990s would trigger a series of devastating wars across the Balkans. The beginning of the end of Yugoslavia was the death of longtime leader Josip Tito in 1980. Tito had long held together the state with an iron fist, but following his death, rampant nationalism, economic decline, and ethnic tensions began to fracture the country. When Croatia and Slovenia declared independence in 1991, the Serbian-dominated military sought to protect ethnic Serbs in these countries. This was the start of the Yugoslav wars. These wars were notable for the widespread ethnic cleansing, genocide, and the role played by paramilitary groups. As Yugoslavia disintegrated, nationalist sentiment surged across the region. The Yugoslavian government was controlled by Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic was Serbian, and he sought to secure Serb-majority territories across Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. This expansionist policy relied heavily on paramilitary groups to carry out operations the regular army could not, and amongst these paramilitaries, arguably the most notorious to emerge was the Serbian Volunteer Guard, better known as Arkans Tigers. Arkan founded this group in 1990. In essence, this was a private army that was loyal to Arkan. It quickly became known as Arkans Tigers due to their black uniforms adorned with tiger insignia. The group was composed of largely men with criminal backgrounds, including former prisoners, football hooligans, and nationalist militants, men who had worked with Arkan during his years of criminality. Some were even released from prison under the condition that they joined the Tigers. The Arkans Tigers would receive training at secret camps in Serbia and had access to modern weapons, supplied covertly by elements of the Yugoslav military and the police. The Tigers would not receive a regular wage, rather their payment was in the form of loot and plunder. The ideological foundation of the Tigers was extreme Serbian nationalism, though for many it was a convenient excuse to engage in twisted acts of violence. The Tigers were tasked with liberating territories with Serb populations and purging them of non-Serbs. They were to specifically target Bosnian Muslims and Croats. The ethnic cleansing was a deliberate, strategic goal. The Tigers used tactics employed during the Second World War when Nazi Germany carried out the Holocaust. One of the first and most widely documented crimes committed by the Tigers occurred in Bijeljina, a town in northwestern Bosnia. In this town were Bosnian Muslims, Serbs and Croats. In April of 1992, the Tigers entered the town and carried out a disturbing massacre on civilians. The Tigers antagonized the Muslims and the Bosniak population into a fight. They attacked Bosnian businesses until the massacre that would come could be justified. Serbian people were asked to leave before the violence and carnage was about to begin. The town was then surrounded by the Serbian military, and whilst the Tigers engaged in street fighting, artillery rained down on the town. The goal was to induce terror into those ethnic groups that were no longer welcome, forcing them to leave through random killings and destroying their homes. An international journalist by the name of Ron Haviv captured photographs of the atrocities carried out by the Tigers, from the Muslim man on his knees begging for his life to Tigers kicking civilians on the ground. Haviv captured the ethnic cleansing that would become typical of the Yugoslav wars and the human suffering inflicted by the Tigers. This massacre would mark the beginning of what would become a broader campaign of ethnic cleansing in Bosnia. It would become the blueprint for the future terrors to come. Images began to surface of civilians shot in their homes and on the streets, but tragically, this drew little immediate intervention. Another example was the town of Foča in eastern Bosnia. The paramilitaries entered the town and forced the men and women to line up. They were then systematically separated and sent to concentration camps. From there, the men were driven to the town's bridges and shot, their bodies then thrown into the river. At the camps, the women were subjected to severe and repeated gang SA. Such was the frequency and the brutality of these attacks, these camps became known as rape camps. Within just a few weeks, nearly the entire Muslim Bosnian population had been driven out of the town. And such would be the grim reputation of the Tigers, the Yugoslav army needed to only spread rumours that the Tigers would soon arrive. This would be enough to encourage the people to leave their homes behind. One witness to the brutality of the Tigers described it as follows. "I saw from 200 meters the doctor being captured with his family. He was tied to a tree, beaten, his face was cut up with knives, and then he was killed. This was all done in front of his wife and children. The other victim was physically disabled and could not leave his home. After the Tigers had left, I went to his house and I found his body. He had one bullet in his throat, one in his head, and he had clearly been beaten. I found the last victim thrown into a stream nearby. His eyes had been cut out and his ears cut off. His body was very twisted and mutilated. It was barely possible to recognize him. The three were buried secretly outside the village." Though officially a volunteer force, the Tigers operated with the blessing and outright support of the Serbian government. They denied direct responsibility, but evidence does suggest that the Tigers were often used as deniable assets. They did the dirty work of ethnic cleansing, whilst giving the government plausible deniability. Arkan would use his Tigers to continue his criminal enterprise. The war and chaos of genocide provided cover for criminal enrichment. The Tigers looted banks, ran protection rackets, and were even rumoured to be involved in human trafficking. Arkan himself accumulated enormous wealth during the wars. He used his profits to build businesses in Serbia, including a luxury hotel, a radio station, and security firms. He lived in opulence whilst continuing to command the Tigers in their ethnic cleansing and managed a criminal empire. At the same time, Arkan was pushed by Serbian media as a nationalist hero. He was often portrayed as a patriot defending Serbian lands and his people. His celebrity status was only elevated in 1995 when he married a Serbian pop singer. Their wedding was televised, which blended celebrity, military, and nationalist iconography. As the Croatian and Bosnian wars were coming to an end, the disbanding of the Arkans Tigers would follow suit. The world had watched in horror as scenes of ethnic cleansing they had carried out were broadcast. By 1996, the Tigers had officially disbanded. However, this was more of a political move than a complete disbanding. Many former Tigers reintegrated into Serbian society, joining security companies. Plenty others would return to criminal activity or just join other militant factions. In 1997, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia indicted Arkan on 24 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. These charges were only made public in 1999, with much secrecy surrounding the gathering of evidence against him. The charges against Arkan included murder, persecution, and forced deportation of civilians in Bosnia and Croatia. Arkan denied all of these charges, during which time the United Nations had started its bombing and intervention in the Balkans. Arkan threatened to rebuild his forces should the UN ever invade. Despite this, Arkan was never arrested. He remained in Serbia, protected by political allies and the state's reluctance to hand over any war criminals. By then, the tide of war had shifted, and international pressure on Serbia was mounting. Still, Arkan retained his freedom, though became somewhat reclusive. He would rarely go anywhere outside, and was always surrounded by bodyguards. And this was for good reason. On the 15th of January 2000, Arkan was assassinated in the lobby of a hotel in Belgrade. He was shot by an off-duty Serbian police officer. The assassin simply walked up to him and shot him in the eye. Many suspected that Milosevic's regime arranged his assassination, as Arkan knew too much and could prove to be a valuable source of intelligence for the international court. With Arkan's death, the Tigers were truly dissolved for good. The legacy of Arkan's Tigers is one of impunity, terror, and unresolved trauma. Survivors of their atrocities continue to seek justice. In post-war Bosnia and Croatia, mass graves still yield the remains of victims murdered by paramilitary forces like the Tigers. Thousands of people remain missing. In Serbia, the legacy of Arkan remains controversial. There remain some nationalists who still regard him as a hero, despite, or perhaps because of, his many crimes. His image appears on murals in Belgrade to this day. Since his death, only one member of the Tigers faced the international courts. The story of Arkan is truly disturbing. In the power vacuum of Yugoslavia's dissolution, Arkan was able to build a private army responsible for some of the worst crimes seen in Europe since the Second World War. He operated with state protection, amassed wealth and fame, and died before he could face any meaningful justice.